Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for the Popcorn Frights Wicked Weekend premiere of Spare Parts. We have director Andrew Thomas Hunt with us. Say hi, Andrew.
Hey everyone, how y'all doing?
Andrew, I absolutely love this film.
Oh, thank you.
I've always been a fan of just really awesome B movies. A group of people just going out fighting for their lives, fighting in the wilderness. And if it's especially if it's something that's kind of like post-apocalyptic. And now you've really brought in like a group of really strong, really interesting women to come together and just fight for their lives with like blood and a really great nemesis and nemesis's father. How did the story come together for Spare Parts?
Probably, I think it might have been like 6 years ago. I'm based in Toronto, and I'm a partner at a company here called Raven Banner, and so we go to TIFF every year, and we were there, and I bumped into a screenwriter, and he pitched us a bunch of films that he was working on, and one of them was this film called Spare Parts about this. It was actually about a group of rock climbers who got kidnapped and then had their arms removed and fought like gladiators. And I loved just that concept. And so we started developing it together, and I wanted to make sure I brought some of my ideas into it. And one of the things that I changed was changing them from rock climbers to a rock band, just because I wanted that punk rock ethos in the film, you know what I mean? And it allowed us to really kind of start with a bang, yeah, we can have the band in a bar, and let's start with a bar fight. And they're traveling across country. Also, rock climbing would have been a challenge to pull off on a limited budget. So there's lots of different, creative and production reasons for changing it. So, but yeah, that's how it all started.
And what was the casting process like? How did you come across making sure you had the right woman for each of the leads?
We just held open auditions. All of the actresses came in, and yeah, it was just like I said, an open audition process. And it was pretty evident early on that that Michelle and Emily were the right women for the role. With Kiriana and Chelsea, because the dynamic of wanting them being in a relationship, we wanted the women to act off of each other, and in the auditions. And Kiriana and Chelsea came in and auditioned together. Like after auditioning separately, then we had them audition together, and there was just a natural chemistry between the two of them. It just felt real, and so yeah, that's how we ended up with the four of them. Jason Rouse is a stand-up comedian here he's from Hamilton, Ontario. He's an old buddy of mine, and we always talked about doing something together. So I just gave him the role. And Julian Richings, that was an easy call because he's a legendary Canadian actor who's been in everything from big budget Hollywood films to little indie films. So it was a pleasure to work with him.
Oh yeah, no, he's terrific. He was just in Anything for Jackson as well,
Yes, of course.
and he's coming up with coming soon in a film, Vicious. Not for the Sake of Vicious, which is a film you executive produced,
Correct.
which is also a film that's going to be playing our Wicked Weekend.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
that's a film I absolutely love, and is a perfect film to show during Halloween,
Yes.
obviously. Um, you worked on a lot of really interesting Canadian genre films. I love Dead Shack, which we hosted at Popcorn Frights a few years back. You've been doing this for quite a while. You've been producing films for a while. This is your second feature directing. What have you learned between your time directing your first feature in 2009 and directing a feature now? And how has the industry changed in that decade?
Um, well, yeah. So I directed my first film, Sweet Karma, back in 2009, and that was essentially the launch point for Raven Banner. My partners and I on that film then started Raven Banner as a sales company to sell other uh, Canadian indie genre films, and then soon international genre films. And so, yeah, we spent, a good 10 years, producing, executive producing other films. We were involved in Turbo Kid and Dead Shack. We did a film many years ago called Avenged, which I was quite proud of. And yeah, you kind of, you learn obviously by doing, and you see what works and what doesn't work. But yeah, there's nothing quite like getting behind the camera to see really truly what works and what doesn't. Because the thing is that everyone watches a film and everyone has opinions on films, and everyone thinks that, or likes to think that they could do it. And maybe some people can, but it's not until you get behind that camera and you see the elements that are getting in your way. It's starting to rain, or you're having problems with equipment, or problems with crew or cast or whatever. You have limited budget, limited days. Directing is just such a crazy beast that it's not until you actually do it that you can really, finitely say how challenging it is and what you would do differently the next time. Do you know what I mean? Like, anyone can watch a film and say, oh, I would have done this differently, but it's not until you're actually there doing it that you can truly make that call, right?
Right.
So while I learned a lot producing films, I learned the most obviously by directing. And Spare Parts was a film that I was proud to be a part of and I loved doing, but it was also an exercise for me to sharpen my teeth again, to get behind the camera again and learn. And I've actually since directed a third feature, which I'm in post-production of right now. And again, I feel like I've grown as a filmmaker as a result of, each film under my belt as a director. I've learned so much from.
And you've had all that time as an executive producer between,
Yeah,
making films, which you also learn a lot from,
you do learn a lot. One of the things I like to say that we learn is the more you're in this business, the longer that you're in this business, the less you can say exactly what works. And I always point to, when I do talks with filmmakers, I always point to Walt Disney and The Lone Ranger. You know what I mean? Like, if Walt Disney can't make a film and have like this formula that works every single time, because the Lone Ranger was a massive flop for them. If Walt Disney can't do it, no one can. Do you know what I mean? And so just when you think, like, sometimes you'll make a film and you'll think this thing is going to be the hottest thing, since sliced bread. And then by the time you make it and the time it's finished and it comes out, the market has changed, the market's flipped. A film came out that was just like it and it bombed. You know what I mean? So you can never, there's so many variables that you cannot determine until the film is done and out there, right?
And it's funny that you bring up The Lone Ranger, because since that movie's released, I've always had a personal theory of why that film did not work. One specific reason.
And what's that?
That he portrayed the character like a buffoon.
Fair. Yeah.
I think that took you out of the story. I think it could have worked if it followed a very simple formula. That performance didn't work. And that's
right. Although that buffoonery is really kind of what made Jack Sparrow an interesting character in some ways, right? So
yes.
Yeah.
But I think it was very different. I think Johnny Depp really brought something completely different to the mainstream, and the studio really hated it at the time when they were making the movie.
Sure.
It just worked. It was lightning in the bottle.
Yeah.
It didn't work for that. But to get back to your film, one of the things is, when you're making an independent film, you're on a tight production. Not a lot of time to mess around. What was the shooting schedule for Spare Parts?
18 days.
Wow.
18 days, yeah.
I'm always impressed when I hear anything less than a month.
Yeah, so it was 18 days, and actually 17 and a half, because we lost half a day to rain, and we got rained out. A thunderstorm just came in, lightning. And that was when we were shooting with Julian Richings. We'd literally built that arena in an actual auto wrecking yard. So like, those are real cars in a real auto wrecking yard. We had a forklift come in and put them all together. We built like the dais on top of like these cars. It was, 15 feet off the ground. And so this severe thunderstorm blew in and threatened to blow the whole thing over. So we had to abandon that day. So yeah, so that was 17 and a half days. of which I think we did, if my memory serves me correct, I think we did about 6 or 7 days of stunts. So all the fight sequences. And then we had then the rest of the time, of course, to shoot the narrative component of
And
this movie.
it seems like a very like grueling production, especially for the cast. It seemed like they definitely had their work cut out for them. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced while in production?
Well, uh, obviously we had budget limitations. It was a low budget film. Um, and obviously we didn't have a lot of time to shoot it. So when we shot the fight sequences, we literally shot them exactly as you see them edited. There was no room for playing around. We literally got, this shot, she rolls out of frame, and this shot, she, raises her axe. And in this shot, the guy gets hit. It was just boom, boom, boom. And that's the only way we could have achieved what we did, is that we couldn't shoot these big master shots and go in for coverage. We had to shoot it like little bit by little bit. And that allowed us the ability to, do these fight sequences so quickly. Right.
Right.
So yeah. And the girls were amazing. Like, they did primarily their own fight sequences. We brought in obviously some stunt players for things that, obviously were dangerous. We don't want our actresses to get hurt because that would kill the production. But, these girls, they rose to the challenge, man. Like they brought it, and they brought it hard. And that's what I was amazed with, is that they all really inhabited those roles, and they relished, getting physical.
They were great. The entire cast was great in the film. My final question that I want to leave everyone with is, what do you find to be some of the biggest challenges now facing the pandemic and working in the industry and production during this time of uncertainty of what's going on in the world?
It's always been a challenge. I'd say I don't want to shit on the internet, because of course here we are. But man, I miss the days of the 80s and the 90s, when independent cinema could, perform in a theater where they weren't, obviously box office mattered, but you could still take a risk on indie films. And the last 15, 20 years has been particularly challenging for indie films, period. They're made on shoestring budgets. They don't make a lot of money in return. People assume that, if a film gets made, you've had money, and so they have no qualms in pirating things. And so there's kind of a lack of appreciation for what goes into making indie films. And then COVID comes along and just destroys cinemas completely and turns everything online. And again, I just hope people appreciate indie films. You know what I mean? That they're not something that's just, they must be making tons of money and they're millionaires by now. It's a lot of people make indie films with blood, sweat, and tears, and they don't do it for the money. They do it for the love of cinema.
Right.
And I think a lot of these indie filmmakers are hopefully what's keeping indie cinema alive. So So after all this is said and done, I hope indie cinema continues to thrive.
I do too. And especially Canadian cinema. I mean, I grew up here in the US, but I've always loved Canadian horror. I'm going to be doing a chat with Tibor Takas about The Gate during during the Wicked Weekend. I love Shivers, Cronenberg Shivers. I love what the sensibilities that have come out of Canada, and really feel Canadian horror has really grown and is really shining right now. Whereas you look at festivals now, a great deal of the programming is out of Canada.
Yeah, there's, I think because we have Telefilm, which is like a government financed film system, which really kind of only puts its money into safe films. That there's all of the indie cinema in Canada are people who are willing to kind of take risks and gamble on genre films, because they're not getting support. They don't have equity. Right. They don't have obviously Hollywood dollars behind them, or these government dollars behind them. So they have to make a genre film, because it's a great way to obviously learn as a filmmaker, but it has the most chance of making your money back internationally. So I think that's maybe why a lot of Canadians gravitate towards genre. So.
And that makes a lot of sense. I want to thank you very much for joining us and allowing us to show your film here at Wicked Weekend. Is there any last words you'd like to say to the audience?
No, thank you so much for playing the film. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and hopefully next time I see you is maybe in person with my next film, The Fight Machine.
Oh, that would be awesome.
By the way, I love your background. Are those all records, punk records?
They're actually CDs, mostly independent hip hop CDs from the
Okay.
90s. I'm an old school hip hop guy.
Nice.
I think Swollen Members is out of Canada.
They are indeed.
You
Yeah.
know, so yeah, I love my indie hip hop. So
Very cool. Well, I grew up on hip hop. I saw the Beastie Boys open up for Madonna back in like 1985. So
nice.
I was there from the beginning, man. It's awesome.
One of my first hip hop concerts was Run DMC in the 80s. I saw Run
Nice.
DMC in the 80s, though I will have to say the first concert I ever went to as a kid, the Cyndi Lauper Girls Just Want to Have Fun tour with the Bangles. Went with my mom and my sister. May not be hip hop, but still a great show.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Pleasure chatting.